My 7-year-old son broke our elderly neighbor's prized rosebush while chasing a soccer ball, and the old man's fury was terrifying. I had no money to replace it, so I knocked on his door the next morning and offered to fix it myself. He watched me work all day with suspicious eyes, and that night he knocked on my door, crying. Before we dive in, I'm curious. What's your favorite type of flower? Drop it in the comments below. And if you love stories about unexpected friendships, healing through kindness, and finding family in unlikely places, please subscribe so you don't miss our next one. Now, let me take you back to the day everything fell apart. The moving truck pulled away from our new rental house in Somerville, leaving behind a scattered collection of boxes that represented the wreckage of my former life. I stood on the small front porch, watching my son Cooper chase a soccer ball across the overgrown lawn, and tried to convince myself that this fresh start was going to work out. 3 months ago, I'd been Matthew Long, successful landscape architect with a thriving partnership in Boston, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and a marriage I thought was solid. Now, I was Matt, unemployed, single father, living in a rental house I could barely afford, trying to figure out how to rebuild a career and a life that had collapsed in the most humiliating way possible. My ex-wife Stella had been having an affair with Ethan Lewis, my business partner of 7 years. When I discovered them together in our office, my world had imploded. The confrontation that followed had been brutal. Stella had been defensive, then cruel. "I got pregnant at 20, Matt," she'd said, her voice cold. "I never got to live my life. I went straight from college to motherhood, and I'm tired of pretending that was what I wanted." Ethan had been apologetic, but not apologetic enough. "It just happened, man. We didn't plan it." Within 2 weeks, our landscape architecture firm, Long & Lewis Designs, was finished. We couldn't work together, couldn't even be in the same room. Ethan bought me out for less than my share was worth, but I'd been too emotionally destroyed to fight. The professional community in Boston was small. Word spread quickly. Former clients took sides, mostly Ethan's, since he was the one still in business. My reputation wasn't exactly destroyed, but the scandal had made everything impossibly awkward. I'd left Boston not because I had to, but because I couldn't stand the whispers, the pitying looks, the knowledge that everyone knew my wife had chosen my business partner over me. The final blow had come 2 weeks ago. Stella and Ethan were moving to London. Ethan had been offered a position with a prestigious international firm, and Stella had made a choice that shouldn't have surprised me, but still felt like a knife to the chest. "I'm not taking Cooper," she told me over coffee at a neutral cafe, unable to meet my eyes. "Ethan doesn't really want children around, and honestly, Matt, I need this. I need a chance to be young again, to live the life I gave up when I got pregnant. Cooper will be better off with you. You're the better parent anyway." So here I was, in Somerville, with full custody of my 7-year-old son, no job, dwindling savings, and a rental house with peeling paint in a neighborhood where I knew no one. The only good thing in this disaster was Cooper himself. He was resilient in the way children sometimes are, excited about his new room, his new school, calling the move an adventure. He didn't fully understand why his mother had chosen to move to another country without him, but he seemed to accept it with a grace that broke my heart. "Excuse me," a sharp voice cut through my thoughts.
I turned to see an elderly man standing at the property line between our yards. He was probably in his late 70s, tall and thin, with silver hair perfectly combed and clothing that looked like it had been pressed that morning. Everything about him suggested precision, order, and a deep disapproval of the chaos currently occupying the house next door. Hello, I said, walking over with my hand extended. I'm Matt Long. We're your new neighbors. He looked at my hand like it might be contaminated, but shook it briefly. Edwin Abernathy. I live here. He gestured to the house next to ours, and I felt my stomach sink. While our rental was shabby and neglected, Abernathy's property was immaculate. The lawn was perfectly manicured, the hedges trimmed with geometric precision, and the flower beds were extraordinary. Even in late October, they were bursting with late-season glooms, chrysanthemums, asters, and what looked like several varieties of roses still showing color. This was the work of someone who understood horticulture. Your garden is beautiful, I said sincerely. Those roses especially, are they David Austin's? He looked at me with slight surprise. Some of them. You know roses? I used to be a landscape architect in Boston. Before, I gestured vaguely at my current circumstances. I see. His expression suggested he saw quite a lot, none of it particularly impressive. Well, Mr. Long, I hope you'll maintain your property to neighborhood standards. The previous tenants let things go rather badly, as you can see. I'll do my best, though I had no idea how I'd find time or money for lawn care when I was desperately trying to find work. And please keep your son away from my garden, Abernathy added, his tone sharpening. Children and gardens don't mix. Too much running around, too careless with where they step. I felt a flash of defensiveness. Cooper's a good kid. He'll be careful. They always are, until they're not? Abernathy turned and walked back toward his house, the conversation clearly over. Friendly guy, I muttered to myself. Who was that? Cooper asked, jogging over with his soccer ball tucked under his arm. Our neighbor, Mr. Abernathy. He seems, particular about his garden. Maybe play soccer in the backyard from now on, okay? Okay, Dad. Cooper looked at the elaborate garden next door with the frank curiosity of a 7-year-old. His flowers are pretty. Can we grow flowers like that? Maybe someday, Bud. For now, let's focus on unpacking. The next 2 weeks were a blur of settling in, enrolling Cooper in his new school, and sending out resumes to every landscape architecture firm within a 50-mile radius. The responses were polite but discouraging. I'd been out of work for 3 months now, long enough that my savings were getting dangerously low, but not long enough that I'd completely lost hope. I'd started taking odd jobs through a local handyman service, basic yard work, minor repairs, anything to bring in some cash. It was humbling, using my professional training to mow lawns and clear gutters, but pride didn't pay the bills. Cooper was adjusting to his new school better than I'd expected. He'd made a few friends, seemed to like his teacher, and hadn't asked too many questions about why his mother was in London and we were here. I knew that conversation was coming, but I was grateful for the temporary reprieve. 2 weeks after we moved in, disaster struck. I was inside making lunch when I heard the crash, the distinctive sound of something breaking, followed by Cooper's terrified, "Dad!" I ran outside to find my son standing at the property line, his soccer ball at his feet, staring in horror at Abernathy's garden. One of the rosebushes, a beautiful specimen covered in deep red blooms, was broken. Its main stem snapped about a foot from the ground. I didn't mean to. Cooper was already crying. The ball went over the fence, and I climbed over to get it, and I slipped, and I fell right on it, and I didn't mean to, Dad. I'm sorry. Before I could respond, Abernathy's back door slammed open. What have you done? His voice was like ice. What have you done to Eleanor's rose? He stormed over to the broken plant, and the look on his face was beyond anger. It was anguish, raw and terrible. Mr. Abernathy, I'm so sorry, I said, putting my hand on Cooper's shoulder. It was an accident. We'll replace it. We'll replace it? He turned on me, and I took an involuntary step back. This is a Lady of Shallot rose, cultivated over 7 years. My wife propagated it herself from a cutting.
You can't just replace 7 years of growth, 7 years of care, 7 years of... His voice broke. He looked down at the broken rosebush, and I saw his hands were shaking. I'm sorry, Cooper whispered. I'm really, really sorry. Just go, Abernathy said, his voice now quiet and cold. Both of you, get off my property. I guided Cooper back to our yard, my son sobbing against my side. Through the window, I watched Abernathy kneel beside the broken rose, touching the snapped stem with a gentleness that made my heart ache. This wasn't just about a plant. Something deeper was happening here, something I didn't understand. That evening, after I'd gotten Cooper calmed down and tucked into bed with extra reassurances that everything would be okay, I sat at my laptop researching Lady of Shallot roses. They were indeed special. David Austin roses known for their beauty and fragrance, but also notoriously difficult to grow. A specimen as mature as Abernathy's would be worth several $100s to replace, even if you could find one. Several $100s I absolutely didn't have. I thought about what I could offer instead. Money was out of the question. But I did have skills, professional expertise that might actually be valuable here. If I could save the rose, repair it properly, using techniques I'd learned over 15 years in the business, maybe that would be enough. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. The next morning, after I dropped Cooper at school, I knocked on Edwin Abernathy's door. He answered after a long pause, his expression guarded. Mr. Abernathy, I can't afford to replace your rose, but I am, or I was, a professional landscape architect. I specialized in historical garden restoration and rose cultivation. If you'll let me, I'd like to try to save the rose. No charge, no strings attached. Just let me try to fix what we broke. He studied me for a long moment. You really think you can save it? I don't know. The break is bad, but the root system looks intact. With the right intervention, grafting compound, proper staking, stress reduction, there's a chance, maybe 50-50. And if you fail, then at least we tried, and I'll owe you a rosebush, which I'll pay for somehow, even if it takes me a year. Abernathy looked past me toward his garden, toward the broken rose that was clearly visible from his doorway. You have professional credentials? I can show you my portfolio, references from clients in Boston, my credentials from the American Society of Landscape Architects.
That won't be necessary. He opened the door wider. My tool shed is open. Help yourself to whatever you need. But I'll be watching. If you damage anything else, this conversation is over, and I will be calling my lawyer. Understood. Thank you, Mr. Abernathy. I spent the rest of the morning at the garden center, buying supplies I couldn't really afford. Rooting hormone, grafting compound, stakes, ties, and soil amendments. Then I returned to Abernathy's garden and got to work. He was true to his word about watching. Through the window, I could see him periodically checking on my progress, his expression skeptical. I tried to ignore the scrutiny and focus on the work. The broken rose was in worse shape up close than I'd hoped. The main stem had snapped cleanly, and several smaller branches were damaged. But it wasn't hopeless. I cleaned the break carefully, applied grafting compound to seal the wound and prevent infection, and stabilized the stem with careful staking that would support without restricting growth. As I worked, my professional instincts, dormant for months, suddenly woke up. I started noticing other things. The garden was immaculate, but there were small improvements that could be made. A bed that needed better drainage, spacing that could be optimized, companion planting opportunities that weren't being utilized. I found myself making small adjustments as I worked. I improved the mulching around the rose to help it retain moisture during recovery. I noticed some early signs of black spot on nearby roses and treated them. I adjusted the angle of a few plants that weren't getting optimal light. Hours passed. I forgot about everything else.
The failed marriage, the lost business, the uncertain future. There was only the garden, responding to my care, becoming more than it had been. Around 3 o'clock, I was putting the finishing touches on my work when Abernathy came outside. He walked slowly through his garden, examining what I'd done. His face was unreadable. "You did more than just fix the rose," he said finally. "I'm sorry if I overstepped. I just saw some things that could be improved, and I—" "Stop apologizing." He knelt beside the repaired rosebush, examining my work with a critical eye. "This is good work, professional work. You understand what you are doing." "Thank you, sir." He stood up, brushing dirt from his knees. "How long did you say you've been out of work?" 3 months. "And why aren't you working? A man with these skills shouldn't be unemployed." I hesitated, then decided honesty was better than evasion. My business partner in Boston was having an affair with my wife. When I found out, everything fell apart: the business, the marriage, my reputation in the professional community. I moved here to start over, but starting over is harder than I expected. Abernathy nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. "Scandal and shame. They follow us, don't they? Even when we're the wronged party." "Yes, sir, they do." "I'll be watching that rose," he said, turning back toward his house. "If it survives, we'll talk again." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it wasn't condemnation either. It was something I hadn't expected. A chance. Over the next 2 weeks, I checked on the rose daily from my side of the property line, looking for signs of improvement or decline. Abernathy was often in his garden, and occasionally we'd exchange nods, but we didn't speak. Cooper asked about it constantly. "Is the rose going to live, Dad? Is Mr. Abernathy still mad at me?" "I don't know, buddy. We just have to wait and see." The rose began to show signs of recovery. New leaves appeared on the stabilized stem. The breaks sealed cleanly. The plant was fighting to survive, and it looked like it was winning.
3 weeks after the accident, there was a knock at our door after dinner. I opened it to find Edwin Abernathy standing on my porch, and he was crying. Not subtle tears, actual visible crying. His face was red, his eyes swollen, and he was holding a handkerchief that he kept using to wipe his eyes. "Mr. Abernathy, May I come in?" His voice was thick with emotion. I need to talk to you." "Of course." I stepped aside, completely confused. Cooper peeked around the corner from the living room, eyes wide with concern. Abernathy sat at our small kitchen table, and for a long moment he just stared at his hands. I sat across from him, waiting, having no idea what was happening. "The rose is going to survive," he said finally. "You saved it. I've been growing roses for 40 years, and I wouldn't have thought it was possible, but you did it. I'm glad. I know how much it meant to you." "Do you?" He looked up at me, tears still flowing. "Do you really understand what that garden means to me?" I think it was your wife's," I said carefully. "You mentioned Eleanor when Cooper broke the rose." "Eleanor was my wife for 46 years. She died 3 years ago this November." He pulled out a photograph from his wallet, a woman in her 70s, silver-haired and smiling, kneeling beside a rosebush. "She was the gardener. She was the one with the gift. I was the helper. I just tried to maintain what she'd created after she was gone." "That garden is extraordinary," I said. "You've done an incredible job honoring her work." "I need to tell you something." Abernathy took a deep breath, and I could see him gathering courage. "Eleanor and I tried for 23 years to have a child. 23 years of hoping, of medical interventions, of heartbreak. We never could. The doctor said it was just one of those things. No specific cause, just it wasn't meant to be." Cooper had moved closer, listening from the doorway. I gestured for him to join us, and he climbed into the chair next to me. The garden became our child, Abernathy continued. Every plant, every bloom was something we nurtured together. We'd plan the seasons, celebrate when something bloomed for the first time, mourn when we lost a plant to disease or cold. It sounds foolish, I know. It doesn't sound foolish. It sounds like love. When Eleanor died, I became so angry. Angry that we'd never had the family we wanted, angry that she was gone, angry that I was left alone in a house that was supposed to be filled with children and grandchildren, but was just empty. His voice cracked completely. When I see children playing, hear them laughing, I'm reminded of everything we lost. So I pushed them away. I became the mean old man who hated kids because it was easier than admitting I was just broken. Cooper slipped out of his chair and walked over to Abernathy. You don't really hate kids, do you? No, son. I don't hate kids at all. I'm just sad that I never got to have any of my own. Cooper looked at Abernathy with an expression of such raw longing, it made my chest hurt. I'm sorry I broke your wife's rose, Cooper said. Your father fixed it, he replied. He probably saved it, actually. I might have given up on it, let it die, because looking at it broken was too painful, but he saw it could be healed. He turned back to me. That work you did in my garden, it wasn't just competent. It was excellent. You have real talent, and you're wasting it doing handyman jobs because some fool in Boston couldn't see what he had. Thank you, but I don't see how...
This is an affluent neighborhood, Mr. Long. Matt, these people spend thousands on landscaping every year. They hire firms from out of town because they don't know there's someone right here who can do the work better. But I know everyone on this street. I've lived here for 41 years. If I recommend you, if I show them what you did with my garden, you'll have more work than you can handle. I stared at him. Why would you do that? Because you treated my wife's garden with the respect and understanding it deserved. Because you tried to repair the damage your son caused instead of just apologizing and walking away. Because I've been alone in that house for 3 years, watching children play in yards up and down this street, wishing I could be part of their lives instead of the grumpy old man they're afraid of. He looked at Cooper. Maybe it's time I stopped being angry about what I didn't have and started appreciating what I do have. Neighbors who care and a garden that's still beautiful. I felt my own eyes getting wet. Mr. Abernathy, Edwin, please. And I mean what I said about the recommendations. These people trust my judgment about gardens. They'll hire you if I tell them to. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me help. Edwin smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. And say you'll let an old man teach your son about roses. Eleanor would have wanted that. She always said children and gardens go together. They both need patience, attention, and love to thrive. The next morning, Edwin began making phone calls. By the end of the week, I had consultations scheduled with 5 different homeowners. By the end of the month, I'd signed contracts for 3 major landscape redesign projects. Edwin accompanied me to each consultation, introducing me, showing before and after photos he'd taken of his own garden, vouching for my skill and integrity. His endorsement carried enormous weight in this community. These were people who'd known him for decades, who respected his expertise and trusted his judgment. This is Matt Long. He understands that a garden isn't just decoration. It's a living thing that needs to be nurtured and respected. He'll give you something beautiful, and he'll maintain the integrity of what you already have. The work was varied and challenging, exactly the kind of projects I dreamed of doing when I'd started my career. A shade garden that needed restructuring,
a formal rose garden that required expert pruning and disease management, a complete landscape redesign for a Victorian home that needed to honor the architecture while incorporating modern sustainability. I threw myself into the work with an energy I hadn't felt in months. This was what I was good at. This was what I loved. And knowing that Edwin's recommendation had made it possible added a layer of gratitude to everything I touched. But the professional resurrection was only part of the story. The real transformation was happening in the relationship growing between a 78-year-old widower and a 7-year-old boy who'd broken his rosebush. Edwin started teaching Cooper about gardening. Every weekend, Cooper would spend hours in Edwin's garden, learning about soil composition, pruning techniques, and the specific needs of different plants. "Roses are like people," he would tell him, kneeling beside a bed with Cooper crouched next to him, both of them examining a new bloom. "Each one is different. Some need lots of attention, some prefer to be left alone. The trick is learning to listen to what they're telling you." Cooper absorbed everything with the intensity of a child who'd found something that mattered. He started a garden journal, drawing pictures of different plants, noting when they bloomed, asking questions that showed genuine curiosity about the natural world. "Why does some flowers smell good and others don't?" he asked one Saturday afternoon. "Evolution," Edwin explained. "The ones that smell good are trying to attract pollinators, bees, butterflies, even some birds. The scent is like an advertisement. Come visit me, help me spread my pollen, and I'll give you nectar in return." "So flowers are basically making deals?" Edwin laughed, a sound I'd never heard from him before, rich and genuine, the laugh of someone who'd rediscovered joy. "Exactly. Nature is all about deals. Partnerships, working together. Nothing survives alone." I'd watch them from my kitchen window, this unlikely pair bonded by broken stems and second chances, and feel grateful in a way I hadn't felt in years. Edwin started joining us for dinner once a week, always bringing vegetables from his garden, tomatoes that actually tasted like tomatoes, lettuce so fresh it was still warm from the sun, herbs that transformed my basic cooking into something special. "Eleanor loved to cook," he told us one evening, watching me fumble with the recipe. "She said that growing food and preparing it were two parts of the same act of love. You grow it with care, you prepare it with attention, you share it with people who matter." "Did you cook together?" Cooper asked. "All the time. She'd plan meals around what was ready to harvest. Summer was tomatoes and basil. Fall was squash and root vegetables. Spring was peas and early lettuces. The garden dictated our menu, and somehow that felt right, living in rhythm with the seasons instead of fighting against them." "We could do that," Cooper said, looking hopefully at me. I looked at our neglected lawn and overgrown flower beds. "You know what? We could. What do you think, Edwin? Would you help us design a kitchen garden?" His face lit up with an expression of pure delight. I'd be honored. Within 3 months, I had enough steady work to leave the handyman service and focus entirely on landscape architecture. Within 6 months, I'd incorporated my own small firm, Long Landscapes, and hired 2 part-time assistants. But every success felt secondary to what was happening next door, in the friendship growing between Edwin and Cooper. The following spring, we transformed our backyard together. Edwin designed it, I implemented his vision with professional precision, and Cooper did much of the actual planting, his small hands learning the feel of soil and roots. We created raised beds for vegetables, herbal spiral near the kitchen door that was both functional and beautiful, and along one fence, a row of rose bushes, including a lady of Shalott that Edwin had successfully propagated from the one that Cooper had broken. "This one's yours," Edwin told Cooper as they planted it together, both of them kneeling in the soft spring soil. "You'll take care of it, watch it grow, learn from it. And someday, when you're older, maybe when you have your own home, you can take a cutting from it and plant it in your own garden, wherever you are. That's how Eleanor's roses have survived, by being shared, by being loved by new people in new places. Cooper took his responsibility seriously. He watered his rosebush religiously, checked it for pests, reported every new leaf and bud to Edwin with the excitement of a scientist making discoveries. The rosebush thrived, and so did we all.
One evening in late June, almost a year after we'd moved in, Edwin invited us to his house for a special dinner. When we arrived, he led us not inside, but through the garden to a spot I'd never really noticed before, a small cleared area near the back fence where two Adirondack chairs faced each other across a small table. "This is where Eleanor and I used to sit every evening," Edwin said, his voice soft with memory. "We'd have a glass of wine, talk about the day, plan the next season's plantings. After she died, I couldn't come here. It hurt too much. I even thought about filling it in, planting over it, racing the space entirely." He'd added a third, smaller chair, child-sized, painted a cheerful blue. "But I think it's time to start new traditions. What do you think, Cooper? Would you and your dad like to help me create a memory garden here? A place to remember people we love, but also to celebrate the people who are still here?" Cooper looked at me and I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. "We'd be honored." We spent the next month creating something beautiful in that spot. A circular garden with a stone pathway, flowering plants that bloomed in succession from spring through fall, and in the center, a small bronze plaque that Edwin had commissioned. It read, "For Eleanor, who taught us that gardens grow in the heart as well as the soil, and for the friends who helped us remember how to bloom." The night we finished it, the three of us sat in our chairs, Edwin, me, and Cooper, watching the sun set over the garden, and Edwin told us stories about Eleanor. Not sad stories, but joyful ones, memories of a life well lived and a love that had endured beyond death. "She would have loved you both," he said, looking at Cooper with grandfatherly affection. "She always wanted children around, wanted to share her knowledge, wanted to see the next generation fall in love with growing things. I think, somehow, she made that happen anyway." "How?" asked Cooper. "By making sure her garden survived. By creating something so beautiful that people like your father would care enough to save it. By teaching me, through 46 years of marriage, that love doesn't end just because someone dies. It finds new ways to grow, new people to touch, new forms to take." 2 years after that first terrible day, when Cooper broke the rosebush, I stood in Edwin Abernathy's garden at a gathering of neighbors, clients, and friends, celebrating 2 milestones: the official expansion of Long Landscapes into a full-service design firm, and the publication of a feature article in Connecticut Gardens and Homes about Edwin's award-winning garden and the unlikely friendship that had saved it. The broken rosebush, Cooper's rosebush, as we now called it, was the star of the garden, covered in deep red blooms more abundant than ever before. The break had actually strengthened it, forcing it to develop more lateral branches, creating a fuller, more dramatic plant than the original had been. "That's what trauma does, if you survive it, and if someone helps you heal," Edwin told the assembled guests, standing with his arm around Cooper's shoulders. "It can make you stronger, fuller, more beautiful than you were before. But the key is that second part. Someone has to care enough to help you through it. Otherwise, the break just kills you." He looked at me with eyes that were bright with tears, but also with joy. "Matt Long saved this rose when it was broken. But more than that, he saved an old man who was broken too. He showed me that anger and grief don't have to be the end of the story. Sometimes they're just the dark soil that something new can grow from."
Cooper, now 9 years old and showing every sign of becoming a serious gardener himself, added his own speech to the gathering. His teacher had helped him prepare it, and he read from a small card with careful concentration. Mr. Edwin taught me that when you break something, you have to try to fix it, and that sometimes the fixed thing is better than it was before, because fixing something teaches you how to be more careful. Also, roses need water, but not too much, and you should always deadhead the spent blooms to encourage new growth. But the most important thing I learned is that gardens are like families. You have to take care of them every day, and sometimes broken things can heal if you give them time and love. The crowd applauded, and Edwin pulled Cooper into a hug that made several people reach for tissues. Later, as the party was winding down, Edwin pulled me aside. "I have something for you." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check, a substantial check, and a letter written in Edwin's precise handwriting. "This is the money I would have spent on professional landscaping for my garden over the past 2 years," Edwin explained. "I want you to use it to expand your business. Maybe hire another full-time employee, buy better equipment, rent proper office space. Consider it an investment in your future." "Edwin, I can't accept this. You've already done so much." "I'm 79 years old, Matt. I have more money than I need and no children to leave it to." He paused, his expression softening. "Except now, I do have a sort of grandson, don't I? And a friend who's become like a son. My will has been updated to reflect that, by the way. When I'm gone, this house and garden will go to you and Cooper, along with everything else. Eleanor and I built something here, and I want it to continue after I'm gone." "Edwin!" "Don't argue with me. I've made my decision, and my lawyer has all the paperwork. Just promise me you'll keep the garden alive, keep Eleanor's roses blooming, and keep teaching Cooper about growing things, because that boy has a gift." I looked at this man who'd been a stranger 2 years ago, who'd seemed like an obstacle, an angry old man who hated children and change. Now I saw him clearly, a person who'd been drowning in grief until a broken rosebush and a scared little boy had given him a lifeline back to the world. "I promise," I said, "and thank you for everything, for believing in me when no one else would, for loving Cooper, for teaching both of us that broken things can be healed if someone cares enough to try." "Thank you," Edwin replied, his voice thick with emotion, "for reminding me that life isn't over until it's over, that there's always room in a garden and in a heart for new growth, new relationships, new reasons to get up in the morning." That night, after Cooper was asleep and the house was quiet, I sat on my back porch looking at our garden. The kitchen beds were producing abundantly. The roses were thriving. The lawn I'd finally had time to properly restore was green and healthy. But more than that, we'd grown roots here, in this house, in this neighborhood, in this community. We'd found family in the most unlikely place, next door, in the form of a grieving widower whose anger had masked a desperate need for connection. My phone buzzed with a text from Stella. She sent them occasionally from London, brief messages asking how Cooper was doing, photos of her new life that were clearly meant to show how happy she was. I used to respond immediately, used to feel that familiar ache of rejection. Tonight, I just set the phone aside. Whatever Stella had chosen was her path. Cooper and I had found ours, and it was fuller and richer than I'd ever imagined possible. A broken rosebush had started it all. A child's mistake, a father's attempt to make amends, and an old man's realization that he didn't have to spend his remaining years alone with his memories and his grief. Sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow from the most damaged soil. Sometimes the strongest bonds form between the most unlikely people. And sometimes, when you think everything is broken beyond repair, all you need is someone who cares enough to help you bloom again. The rose that Cooper had broken was thriving now, stronger than ever. Its deep red blooms a reminder that broken things, when tended with patience and love, can become more beautiful than they were before. Just like families, just like friendships, just like the messy, imperfect, extraordinary life we were building together, one careful day at a time. What did you think of the way Edwin dealt with his grief and how a child's mistake became the beginning of healing for everyone involved? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story about unexpected friendship, second chances, and finding family in surprising places touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss our next uplifting tale. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.